by now, everyone knows that Die Hard is a Christmas movie.
But did you know that Jurassic Park is an Easter movie?
Hold on to your butts.
Welcome to the Spoiler Alert podcast, and today the movie we'll be reviewing is Steven Spielberg's Jurassic Park. And just real quick, before we get into the review, I'd like to say that we are now available on Spotify, so please check that out. I definitely recommend it for especially our earlier episodes when the internet wasn't so great to us. And you might just want to listen to some audio instead of looking at the leg, but we tried our best. And also we're gonna start having some exclusive audio to couple with some episodes for just the audio versions. We have a J horror video coming up, and we may end up just attaching some additional audio footage to the back end of that for the audio version on SoundCloud, Spotify, and Google Podcasts. Apple Podcasts are on the way, so I can't quite say that we're available everywhere podcasts are found, but we're getting there. So I encourage everybody to go on there and give us a follow. While you're on YouTube, hit the bell, subscribe, hit like on the video, because that generally counts more than views. So Jurassic Park, it is, especially for people our age, Dakota, like we grow up with it, you know, like it's not by any means a perfect movie. It's not, you know, it's not ultra special, but it is.
I think it is. I mean, I think it's a pretty substantial movie. I mean, but it is imperfect. I mean, I think rewatching it this time, some of those, I think even as a kid, I was aware of some of the, like a few problems, and those were still there. And I noticed a couple new ones, but I think it still, you know, holds up. It's a hugely enjoyable movie. So,
right. Everyone has pretty much seen it. Everyone's grown up with it to some degree. And it truly is like one of the more entertaining movies you can possibly think of that everyone would like. Like, you don't have to be film nerds like us or anything to enjoy Jurassic Park. But again, the importance here, it's an Easter movie. And, you know, I'm just gonna plant this in the viewer's mind going in here. Eggs, a resurrection, fucking dinosaurs are kind of bird-like, so that's like kind of chickens. Like chickens used to be T-Rexes, basically.
Sure.
And you know, and if John Hammond is not the human equivalent to the fucking Easter Bunny, I don't know who is. He's walking around there, white beard, white clothes, passing out eggs to people, creating eggs out of seemingly nothing. He mentions that he's there at the hatching of every dinosaur. He walks around with a cane. It's a fucking it's a fucking Easter movie. Jurassic Park, it begins with in Isla Nublar, which I honestly don't know where it is, but
I think it's fictional.
Okay, it's fictional. Well, we're basically hanging around the Caribbean most of this movie anyway.
Costa Rica, right?
Costa Rica off the Atlantic, kind of dancing around that area. And it's the forklift scene where they're wheeling in this Velociraptor. We do not see the Velociraptor yet. As an audience, we just see little hints and clues. Like, it's very Spielbergian in that way to start.
People lined up with like a bunch, you know, guns and shit, and it's
tasers. Yep. Cattle prods that are just like intense ass cattle prods, and they're trying to lock it into this gate. But once they open up the door to the cage, basically whatever is in there, we know it's a Velociraptor, basically kicks and leverages the cage apart. And then the dude falls down that was opening the gate, and the Velociraptor grabs him by the legs and is pulling him in. And this Australian dude, who we would later learn is named Robert Muldoon, he comes into play later on. He's trying to save this dude. Doesn't work, and they're just, zapping the shit out of this Velociraptor, and it really does nothing.
I mean, it looks like a really heavy duty cage. So it's like, I'm not sure if it could actually shift that whole thing. And then also the angle at which the dude's obviously it's getting across that this thing is super fierce and strong and whatever.
And intelligent, because it it knows how to use like its own leverage.
Some of those movements are pretty exact. I mean, it's like pull it. I don't know.
And it seemed like it was locked in. Like it seemed like if the cage was that heavy duty and the gate was that heavy duty, that the locking mechanism keeping the pushback from happening would have been strong enough. Nitpicks.
It doesn't look like the cage is locked up, which maybe they should do that going forward. You should have something that attaches the cage to the gate that of the pen or whatever that they're trying to transfer it into. So, something to attach that, so that can't happen.
Yeah, or even ram the forklift right against it. You know what I mean?
Oh, yeah, something like that.
Just to add some weight to it,
right?
I guess.
So live and learn.
It's exciting opening action sequence. Classic Spielberg opening action sequence that I'm sure it's a common thing where if you have an action movie or even a drama, you want to kick it off with an action sequence that goes back all the way to Shakespeare. Shakespeare started every single thing with a very exciting scene.
So, I think Krenz opens more with like the mystery, like he graduated the original novel or whatever of Jurassic Park. Like I think he opens with more of like the mystery. Like I think there's a work. I think that basically that worker from the opening, that scene's not in the book, but it's the aftermath. So they bring a worker into like a nearby hospital, and he's been ripped to shit, and the doctor thinks this looks like an animal attack, but they're saying it was like a work accident or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
So, it's mystery building, but I think Spielberg's take is a lot more engaging, so.
Yeah, I could see how that works for a book though. And by all means, I never read the book, never got around to it. So whatever you do know about the book, feel free to interject if there's like an interesting diversion.
Like Hammond dies, Malcolm dies. There's some big differences, but then Malcolm doesn't die because he comes back in the Lost World, and everybody's just kind of like, how the fuck, So.
I do know that in the movie, we might get to this a little bit later, but in the movie they were originally going to try to kill off Malcolm.
Okay.
But
because that's in the book, and then Crichton basically retcons that with his sequel book, which is hugely different from the Lost World, the movie, but he knew Spielberg wanted to do a sequel, so then he started writing the Lost World, and he brought back Malcolm even though he died in the book, and I don't even know what the explanation was because I haven't.
Okay, I'll just say it now then. But I was watching the special features, and they were gonna have Malcolm die during the T-Rex attack, along with the lawyer, but Jeff Goldblum suggested to Spielberg, like, I don't know,
Burt Reynolds pose for like the rest of the film, wouldn't that be way better?
Well, he suggested to Spielberg that Malcolm, he's a flirt, but he's not like a bad person, and he's so interesting and engaging, and Goldblum does a pretty damn good job with him. I actually watched Jurassic Park earlier this year, and that time it was like the first time in a few years that I had seen it, and I'm ready for like hammy ass like Goldblum, and I'm like, yeah, it's even better than I thought. It's even better than I remember.
He has easily the best lines in the movie, and everything thematically, like the movie's trying to say, kind of comes out of that character. So, but I think that would have been a huge loss.
So after this dude dies, we dissolve into the Dominican Republic amber mine, and in here we kind of get some prologue because the lawyer comes in
I
on
mean,
a raft.
exposition, like
The lawyer was like, "Where's Hammond?" I
I think
forgot if the
oh yeah,
lawyer.
the lawyer wants to speak to Hammond because
Yeah,
investors are anxious now that there's been a death. Oh,
right. Yep. So the death in the opening sequence kind of seems like it could be sort of window dressing, but it does, kick off the story.
yeah. Yeah, because
Because
now investors are shaken because and they're facing a massive lawsuit from the family and everything. So
yeah,
yeah,
and
so
they subtly sneak in the exposition that Hammond's not here because he's with his daughter. She's getting a divorce.
I didn't
And
hear. I don't remember that.
yeah, he says it super like quickly and quietly, because the lawyer's like, "Where's Hammond? I want to talk to Hammond." And
And
then
that's why he's got the grandkids. Then that kind of okay.
yeah, that's why, because it's like, oh, the parents are getting divorced.
Right.
Go spend the weekend with grandpa.
Right. Yeah.
Yep. So
All right.
I think that was very clever and like exposition to where it's not clunky. You get it
Oh,
out of the fucking way. You know what I mean? And you probably don't even always catch it. Like I didn't catch that like the first probably however many times I watched this movie. It was probably just the last two times I watched it that I
so yeah,
caught it.
maybe I did and totally forgot. So it's like I don't, but it's yeah, but it's all done really. That just the way that scene plays out. I mean, they're talking like the lawyer's still talking while he's talking to another dude. I mean, it feels very realistic and like it doesn't feel like a big exposition dump. Everybody's,
And
yeah,
I do find that that's how a lot of Spielberg movies tend to move, where most of them he tries to get the exposition just out of the way, almost to only that your subconscious picks it up.
yeah.
Because like I find this that like even in Raiders of the Lost Ark, like rewatching that sometimes scene for scene for scene, or sometimes you kind of it kind of like goes by like so effortlessly that you're like, oh wait, how did we get here? You know,
Oh, yeah.
but then it's like, oh, it's because the exposition was so subtle, they didn't want it to weigh the actual fun and enjoyment of the movie down. They just wanted to cover their bases, move on.
Right.
And
And usually, those action pieces are so big and,
yeah,
breathtaking, whatever that, yeah, you get lost in them. And, so yeah, it's not till a little later that you kind of can rechart, the movie. But
yeah.
yeah, so
And so many movies, like we've talked about Johnny Mnemonic, who
mm,
clearly had a bad time doing exposition. It's like they kind of get almost nervous, like stage fright, when it's like, I gotta explain what the movie's doing.
right.
And then it's just they fuck it up and it's like, you're going too long, buddy. And like,
Yeah.
but Spielberg is master of just slipping it in. And
Yeah.
that sounds sexy.
Wow. Well, it's a very sexy movie. Like that's the other thing I see. Like everything in this movie is sexy, especially the sound design. Like just all the little clicks of like vials sliding into the chambers of the Barbasol can, the click of the stock on the Spaz 12, the switches, the buttons, the Jeeps, just everything in this movie is just hugely sexy. Like visual. I don't know if that seems to be like when I look back at a lot of these movies I watched as a kid, like those sounds and images tend to be a little more, but I think even without that, it just is hugely satisfying. I think that the sound was done at Skywalker Sound or whatever.
I think so. And
yeah.
and in both of my notes, every time that they have the Barbasol can, I do make a note that just sound design exclamation point.
Oh, yeah,
Um,
it's just beautiful.
so basically this lawyer is all uptight and whatever, and then the miner, I think at one point the lawyer asks, what would Hammond want to do with anything with an amber mine anyway? And then like at that time, like they have just extracted another mosquito caught in
Yeah.
amber, and the miner looks at it, and then camera zooms in, and the mosquito is going to be important.
Well,
Uh,
and that's a big thing for me though. I'm like, how in the hell do you ever find these? I mean, like it just seems like a needle in the
right,
in the haystack that is the entire world. Like, how are you going to find
right.
amber?
They called it an amber mine. So I don't know if that's even a thing that like exists. Like if there's large concentrations of amber that people find in the dirt.
Yeah, I mean, I
But
wonder if there'd be a way to find, okay, because obviously they get stuck in the sap of the trees. I wonder if you like, so you have like Ellie Sattler, who's a paleobotanist, and it's like
yep,
maybe you could dig up fossilized pieces of wood or trees, and you could go, this kind of tree was here, so by
yeah,
extension, but I don't know, it just seems so. I know that money's not really an object for Hammond, but to have like, I just don't know where you'd even start. I
yeah,
mean, with those digs.
yeah. If we have any paleontologists in the comments, let us know, because a lot about paleontology and anthropology is just super wild. Where like you have these hot spots where a bunch of fossils can be found, and then in South Dakota and North Dakota and Montana, like the Badlands area, you get a ton of paleontologists, because
Where do we find Grant? Is he in South Dakota or where?
he's in Montana, and
Oh,
that's where we
Montana.
kick it off. And like, but like,
Well,
some of the paleontology done around there is they
that's all
find,
the brachiosauruses and shit. That's where they find them, right, in Montana.
yeah, and I think they find T-Rexes too.
Okay.
And um but like even in South Dakota down through Kansas, they find evidence of like large oceans, because they find like fish that wouldn't live in a freshwater environment, or at least it's such a broad scale of fish that they're like, this was either like the biggest lake ever, or it was a sea, or just a flat out like just ocean down the Midwest. Which if you map that out with your mind, and you like, one of the reasons St. Croix Falls is like a national landmark, and the Ice Age trail and everything is there, is because the water, if you think of where like downtown St. Croix is, the water used to be at least that high.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Yeah, like the river. Because if you just look at it, if you think about it like from a macro perspective, the whole thing looks like a canyon that a
Right,
river is just slowly cutting through. You know what I mean?
right.
And like it used to start way up here, and now it's like down there. Well, and there's also uh
That's,
interstate park
oh yeah,
on at least the Wisconsin side. I think it's on both sides though.
potholes.
Uh yeah, there's like these whirlpool potholes that look just like tornadoes or hurricanes or something, like super crazy, like defined spirals, and it's on top of the fucking cliffs. So
Yeah.
like, it just really, and you only get those kind of whirlpools at the bottom of an ocean, of like an area where rocks just get in there and over time erode it out. uh
Okay. Yeah. No. See, I didn't know. I've gone all that. I did again when I was a kid. I mean, I walked through the park and probably read all those things, but I obviously information retention is probably not my greatest skill. So, but
I know a little bit, but it blows my mind sometimes how paleontologists can like find fossil like hot spots.
well, now they have. I think that's what we see in it when it goes to grants is that that
Right, they have a
technology.
radar.
Yeah, they shoot that. I forget what that's called, but yeah, underground, and then
I
yeah,
think
it's
they
radar.
literally just shoot like a shotgun slug into the ground, and then they have radar detectors around it to
Yeah,
get the.
now it's slightly. They have like I think the technology now it's just you basically just stab into the ground. You don't have to fire something down into the. I can't remember though. I was reading up on this recently, but oh yeah, and then lidar technology. That's how they find all those those Mayan ruins and shit that are
Mm,
totally covered up by the jungle and now we have lidar technology in like our phones like with the iPhone 12. So that's how far technology's come. But but yeah, so
right. So after he sees the amber, or we get a close up on the amber, we cut to the Badlands area in Montana, which also cuts through, I know, South Dakota, and I assume portions of North Dakota as well. Um, Went to the Badlands when I was a kid.
yeah,
Uh,
I've gone a
it,
few times.
It's been a long time, but I know that when I made our trip to South Dakota when I was a kid, and we saw Mount Rushmore, the Badlands, all that stuff. Apparently, I patted the horse from Dances with Wolves.
Oh, I've been there. I know where you're talking about. Yeah. Yeah. Well, I don't know that he's still alive, but I know the place you're
Oh,
talking
the
about. Yeah,
horse
I've
is
been
probably
there.
dead.
Yeah. So, but
I have
but I
no
was just
recollection.
there like a few years ago. So I'd gone a few times, but I'd never gone in there. And yeah, they have all the Dances with Wolves. Oh yeah, camel spit in my eyeball. That happened there.
A
So that
camel.
was, yeah, they have a camel, and I was lucky enough to have that camel spit in my eyeball.
In these Badlands, we get like shotgun charges, like we were just saying, shooting into the ground, and the computer picks it up on radar. And this is when we're kind of introduced to Alan Grant, who is looking at the computer screen. He's kind of he's not necessarily mistrusting of technology, but he's definitely like your mom looking at the computer or whatever, or like,
Well, yeah, he
like,
touches it and it fuzzes. Well,
it's
I think
just
he
like,
says he
oh,
hates,
I don't get it.
computers because he doesn't get them. I mean, which ties in with his character. He's very much in the past, literally. I mean, digging things up. So,
Yeah, and then
now that happens throughout the movie too, where it's like even the buckles on the helicopter, and then in the car, like it stops, and he's like, "What did I touch?" Like he just, yeah. So
he's just not compatible with technology. And then he's explaining how like pubic bone is shaped like a bird, and how like, this is
because they're
science
looking at the
too.
Velociraptor skeleton that they picked up on the imaging or whatever. Yeah. So
Yeah, and this is science too. That's like even most recently, just like it's only now that like in the last handful of years that they've started putting more feathers on dinosaurs, like in science books and stuff like that.
yeah, I think
Because
they knew by like the time of like Jurassic Park 3, but because of continuity, they're like, well, it wouldn't really make sense they couldn't figure out a way to
yeah,
put them on
and,
the
and
dinosaurs.
it was still just theorized to a certain point.
Yeah.
They're still not sure how bird like they were.
Mhm.
uh like, like, were they able to fly? I'm sure some of them weren't. It would be fucking crazy if a T-Rex could fly. um
I don't
that
see
I
how
think
that, I mean,
that would
pretty
immediately be
sure
the
that's,
biggest bird ever, I think.
but
uh,
yeah, it would probably be a useless bird with like just like little, like, oh, what are those ones that can't even take off, from the,
like
well, there are plenty of birds like that, but yeah, I mean, it's got useless arms. I'm sure it would just have like useless little chicken wings or some shit,
yeah,
like,
and then right next to it's useless chicken hands.
right.
Well, actually, chickens don't have hands, so
Or, yeah, well,
but and then he scares the shit out of a kid. And
yeah,
like another nitpick here, where basically most of the criticisms come down to like nitpicks, where
yeah.
it's kind of like this, where you kind of forgive it because it's just entertaining enough, and you give it the slack. But there's no way the kid saw the monitor from there and was like, that doesn't look scary.
Oh, I didn't even think of that. Yeah, because he's like over
Because
there.
there's adults crowded around the screen that are all like 6 feet tall.
Right.
And he's like a little 4-foot kid, like all the way back there. He's like,
Yeah.
that doesn't look scary. And then Sam Neill goes and scares the shit out of the kid by being like, oh yeah, he'll cut up your belly, he'll cut your dick off, you're alive when he eats you.
Yeah, I
And
couldn't
then
tell if he like slashed at the crotch. I'm like, Jesus. Yeah, like, so, but
and
yeah, I think
and
Statler
also,
even says later, like, you could have just pulled a fucking gun on him, Grant. I mean, you may as well.
and
So,
also, I don't know how often, like how common like a raptor talon is to find intact, because the idea behind fossils, people just think they're bones. It's more of like a hollow imprint that the ground leaves behind,
yeah.
and then it fills in with slightly different like minerals or whatever that are
Right.
no longer raptor minerals. It's just dirt that like fill back in. So basically any fossil you find are basically rocks. There's not a lot of biological information left over. Although somehow people can find a fucking ton out about any living creature about digging through their shit. So
Yeah. Yeah,
like
I think
even
we
if
talked
it's
about that. Yeah, like I said.
even if it's fossilized shit, like, and that actually kind of in a short term instance occurs in this movie later on with that huge
Big
pile of shit. Just
Yeah.
yeah, so basically the message there is like getting the audience kind of prepared that, like, raptors are in a way even scarier than T-Rexes. So
Yeah.
raptors don't give a fuck. They're super smart. They run in packs. T-Rexes never ran in packs. They're like, raptors are definitely more agile, athletic, better with their claws. T-Rexes kind of are just these really huge mouths that just are eating machines, basically, that are also very effective, but not as dangerous because they're not as intelligent, I would say.
Right. Yeah, they definitely set it up there where it's like that's going to be the thing to be frightened of. I think I don't know if there's even a musical cue during that, like, that's kind of ominous.
I think it's kind of quiet for, I think there's just natural sound until Hammond comes in on the helicopter, maybe. But also we get a little quick thing about here where it becomes obvious that Alan Grant and Ellie Sadler are boyfriend girlfriend, and
I was never sure. I thought that was always kind of ambiguous.
Way back in the day, I thought, like, I wasn't sure, but I mean, they're kind of like grab assing a little bit, and
okay, I didn't catch that. But...
yeah, they kind of grab ass a little bit, and then like even Ellie's like, it would be good for you to be around some kids, and then
I mean, I picked up on that, but I didn't know if it was. Yeah, I don't.
You didn't know if they were already boyfriend girlfriend or if they were kind of
or
just
she was just kind of
feeling each other
or maybe
out.
they weren't because of that, because it was clearly something that she's she wanted to probably have kids and he doesn't, and so I just thought,
like, I guess this was the special features that it's like super cemented, but Spielberg does say that like they're boyfriend girlfriend from the beginning.
Okay, I see. I was just never sure about it.
It's not the most obvious thing, because I don't know, they try to it's like they try to like seemingly like intentionally make it not a love story too, because they don't want it to distract you away from anything else, but they are a little touchy-feely, and that's about like all the clues that you get. And then they talk about the kids, and then Hammond comes in on this helicopter, and he's already in the fucking trailer with the champagne. He got there pretty quick, almost like he's inhuman, almost like he's a fucking Easter rabbit.
Oh,
so if that's where he gives a proposition, he's bearing the lead. He basically says, all right, I need you to help me sign up on my park. And then they're like, why do you need paleontologists for this? And he's like, I'll show you in due time. But what do you think about me funding your expeditions for 3 years? And then they're like, fuck yeah. And then they get a little more grab assy. You cut to Costa Rica, where this dude Dennis, the actor's in a few things. He's in
he looked familiar.
The first thing that comes to mind is Basic Instinct for some reason.
Was he one of the
he's in the leg crossing scene,
right?
In Basic Instinct, sweating.
Right.
And then I think he has a part in JFK as well.
Okay, because I know I've seen him in other things, but I can't remember.
We're in Costa Rica. Dennis is immediately already like sloppy as fuck. Like, he's, very brash and like kind of arrogant. Like, they're doing like this secret thing, and the guy that's coming to pay him money in exchange for the embryos is like trying to be covert. At the same time, Dennis is like basically shouting out their entire business. So he's just altogether a sloppy individual.
Right. Well, and then just taking the shaving cream, putting it on the uneaten pie, and just everything about it. Yeah, I mean, so, but then there's that important line where he makes Dodson pay for his meal, because he's like, don't get cheap on me, Dots. And that was
Yeah,
Hammond's mistake, A lot
because
of his
that's
dialogue's money oriented, which normally might have not been. There's so much in this movie that like normally wouldn't be very subtle, but like just works for some reason. So I mean, Nedry's kind of one note in that sense. It's just he's a slob and an asshole, and he's greedy, and mismanages his money and blames other people, and is, like it just, but it just works, So like I don't know why. It could have, because like in lesser hands, it could have just been really clunky.
I kind of agree with him here, but Spielberg actually doesn't think that he has a style. And it's not even like an arrogant, like I can do anything thing. It's like he's not as stylistic as, say, Kubrick or Tarantino or like some people like that. But I still think when you're watching a Spielberg movie.
Where he stands out to me is like it's suspense. Like when that's where I think he has a very unique signature. So obviously he doesn't just do suspense films, but when he is doing that, he's unparalleled, other than like Hitchcock, which was his huge inspiration. Like I think he's sneaking onto studio sets to observe Hitchcock making movies and shit. So yeah, so like when it comes to suspenseful movies, Duel, Jaws, Jurassic Park, I do think he has a unique signature, but beyond that, it's I mean he kind of does everything, so.
And his action movies, they're just great at like every action sequence generally one ups the next.
Yeah, but the set pieces in this are just fantastic, and in Lost World too. So I mean, I think Lost World gets a lot of shed. I totally disagree. I think it's almost as good as the original film. I know a lot of people, the way they talk about Lost World, it feels like they're talking about Jurassic Park 3, because like, I know it's, because like that's kind of the obvious sequel. Like that's what you would have expected from Lost World. It's just like, I don't know, Grant lands on the island, gets that whole like Lost World felt like a natural extension. It felt a lot darker. It's maybe not as fun, I'm trying to like do a really brief Lost because I have so much to say about it, but just I think it's hugely underrated. I love that movie to death. I mean, it does have some logical inconsistencies, but watching Jurassic Park 1, there are not even just continuity things. Like what was the big one? And the ship with the severed hand
when it escaped.
Yeah, the cargo ship or whatever, bringing the TRex and the baby to the San Diego dock or whatever. If the whole crew is killed, there's gore everywhere, and you have like the hand. I'm like, well, what did that? If they're still in the cargo holds, that was the biggest like inconsistency. But there were a couple of those in even in this one. So like, but yeah. I mean, I don't know. I just think it's a hugely underrated movie. I mean, once you get to Jurassic Park 3, it has its moments and whatever, but it's definitely a huge dip in quality. But what's mind blowing is that people talk about like Jurassic World, like, oh yeah, it's getting the series back on track because it's been in decline ever since Lost. I'm like, Lost World had something to say, and I did things fantastically well. And like, I mean, Jurassic World and its sequel, with Fallen Kingdom, is just a total rehash of the Lost World, much lesser. I mean, it hits the conservationist aspect, which made a lot of sense for Lost World. I mean, like it's one of those things where you think about it and it's like, oh yeah, that's of course, like, but the more obvious thing would have been to do like Jurassic Park 3, and you come up with this contrived reason to get those characters back on the island, whereas Lost World kind of made sense, like it's Hammond trying to take responsibility for his action, and it just makes sense that he kind of take this conservationist stance, and I thought it was a really good movie, as a good story.
Okay, and then they land in Jurassic Park. Well, they're in the helicopter in Jurassic Park, and
that beautiful shot of that iconic valley in Hawaii. Yeah, but just beautiful.
And we start, and this is where we get the introduction to Ian Malcolm, who's brought along with the lawyer guy because he is a mathematician who specializes in chaos theory. So he can basically calculate chances of basically shit going wrong. Right. And he is probably the flirtiest, dopest mathematician in the history of cinema.
Right. Yeah, they play him up like, I think it says that, like, it's like, I bring the professionals and you bring the rock star, because he's it's supposed to be this like sort of, well, you see that in the scientific community where you have like something new, and then it's like all the
They're the
rock
cool
star
guy.
scientists
Yeah.
get it. Yeah, right. So he's like the hip, cool nerd, I guess. So
Yeah. And the scene like pretty much starts with one of the most iconic laughs in the history of cinema, where it's like
I don't know if he's chewing gum or like that's
like it's got like his laugh in itself is like a 5-act play. Like,
bringing it back to like Shakespeare. Yeah, I guess.
Yeah. And which, by the way, there was this YouTube video where it's like 4 hours of Goldblum laughing, and I played that over while I was writing up a paper.
Wow.
And then they're driving over and we see these big ass brachiosaurs, which when I was a kid was like my favorite scene of the movie because it wasn't scary. But like, it was still
that though, when they get off the helicopter and then you have the park servicemen, what would you call technicians, whoever, they slide the metal bars behind them as they get onto the Jeeps or whatever. And then I think John Williams' score takes an ominous turn, like they're locked in the zoo.
Yeah.
So yeah, but going on to the brachiosaurs,
that CG, it's still iconic. Like at the time in 93, that was an Avatar like jump.
But I mean, for 93, it's still really good. I'm amazed how well it does hold up. I mean, you can tell
it holds up. I'd say the brachiosaurs in that specific scene are when it doesn't hold up just as well as the other
some
scenes.
of the other shots, because they're mixing animatronics with like shorter shots of CGI.
Right, and it's so bright and sunny and clear in that you really have there's not many flaws, but every flaw that there is to be seen.
And lighting is what always gives away CG.
Yeah,
you never seem to get it right. So
we get T-Rex scenes later on that I think look a lot sharper.
I mean, the brachiosaurs, yeah, you can tell they're CGI. But I mean, I wouldn't say it's like aged horribly. It's like this is 1993.
It just hasn't aged as well as the rest of Jurassic Park, I'd say.
And I guess what you're saying, because it is such a big moment was this big spectacle back in 1993. It maybe doesn't have quite the same impact, but I think what saves it though is the acting in that scene is still so like filled with wonder, and it's just like I think the actors are what saved the scene from
Sam Neill almost faints, and
and just oh god, Laura Dern's face when he turns her head, in the car, and she's just like,
because the scene actually starts where she was like, she picked up a big leaf and she was like, oh well, this leaf has been extinct for millions of years. What the fuck? Because
she's like
she's the plant,
so that's the most interesting shit in the world for her. It's like, what the hell is going on here? And then the head
and then and that was something that like I didn't always catch until like I got a little bit older, where I was like, oh yeah, like the plant life is all repurposed too, which I'm not sure how they got plant DNA.
What? Yeah, maybe. You said, maybe they're digging through shit or something. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, anyone that digs through shit, let us know. Hit us up. Anyone
watching this podcast series, so that's like our whole audience.
Sorry. Right. At this point, the lawyer was very skeptical, like in this entire drive up and the airplane. And as soon as he sees the dinosaurs, they're like, "You're gonna make a fucking fortune!"
Right.
Like, and he just totally just lays down for Hammond, and he was supposed to be the one that's like ethical,
right? Well, not ethical, but yeah, he was the one who was supposed to represent the investors, right? He was supposed to be the critical one who's like going to come in here, do the inspection, be hypercritical, and just as soon as he sees that, he's totally on board. He understands immediately that, like, oh my god.
Yeah, and Hammond brought on the paleontologists thinking like, oh, they're going to be on board no matter what.
Right. So it's actually that happens later during the dinner scene, which my thing with Jurassic World, what I was going to say is that's what's lacking, that dinner table conversation where all the adults are speaking or whatever right before the kids are introduced. That is everything that's missing from Jurassic World, where they're discussing the ethics and what this means, and like that, none of that's in there, so.
Yeah.
And that's really the heart of it.
And they even have time for that later on in the movie too, in between a bunch of massive action sequences where Laura Dern sits down with Hammond one more time, and we'll get
that
into
time
that
on opposite ends of this really long table, which I just thought about when you mentioned it. It's like there's probably some kind of visual statement there. I don't,
Yeah,
but
there definitely is. It's been I'd say that kind of visual statements used a lot in just a lot of movies where you have like people just on opposite sides of an opinion or opposite sides of like class or whatever. And then so then they go on the demonstration like kind of tour that's kind of like a Pirates of the Caribbean ride setup where they're going through the thing and they explain how the DNA is spliced with frogs, and there's also a little bit of like VR AI stuff.
Yeah, I wanted to talk about that because it's something I left out of Johnny Mnemonic, but we'll get to it. But I mean, as far as the DNA thing, I just wanted to say he reminds me. Well, so they would have come out afterwards, but the paper Mr. Clippy or something from Microsoft '95, like the big eyeballs on the paper clip.
Yeah,
I don't know if reminds. Yeah, that's what he reminds me of. But this would have been 2 years earlier, so maybe Bill Gates stole the DNA character.
I mean, it seems like big technology likes to become what movies warn people about.
Right. Yeah.
Like
Skynet. We have a military program called Skynet for our drones and shit. We decided to call it Skynet. That's just genius, right? I mean, yeah. Great idea. There is a company called Cyberdyne. I think they do, I think it's Japanese, but I think they do exoskeletons for like flight attendants to lift heavy bags and shit. So yeah.
That seems oddly specific that it would be flight attendants and not like miners or like a massive.
I don't know why, but I think that's the main market is flight
or
attendants.
Like massively dangerous industries like oil drilling or whatever, where you might consider like, oh, it kind of makes sense. Like, why put people in harm's way when there's like an accident every month?
I know there are other exo suits being developed for other things, but I think that's their primary thing is just carrying luggage onto planes. I don't know why, but in Japan, I think it's been a while since I looked it up, but
so they go through the AI that has the missing links is spliced with frog DNA, which comes into play later, and they also use like it looks like some kind of artificial intelligence where a guy has like this sort of this glove that
so they say VR. I mean it's all just geeky stuff, but then like I'm really interested in it. It's kind of like cool to trace sort of the genesis of some of these visualizations of technology in film, So so this would be 93 before Johnny Mnemonic with and what it looks like a lot is the Sony Blastron, which came out in 95, so that'd be the same year, and so did the Nintendo Virtual Boy. And but it looks most like a Blastron, which was probably maybe like they were aware that technology was in development in 1993, and kind of there were some prototype images that they used in Jurassic Park to kind of, because that's what it looked like. Even the visor and everything kind of looks like that. But and then I was going to say another thing with like just manipulating things with hands. I mean, like that probably obviously Minority Report in 2003, another Spielberg movie, and then later we got the Microsoft Kinect, which is that I don't know why that didn't take off, because I thought that was the coolest shit in the world, that you're just in your living room moving shit with your hands, and it's totally like Minority Report without the gloves. So so you can see like 93 would be the first one here with Jurassic Park that I could think of, then Johnny Mnemonic in 95. And I mean I'm sure there have been other visualizations like so it's just kind of an interesting thing to chart.
So so it's really kind of like up on how the technology is starting to develop, and maybe not biological technology like Jurassic Park, but at least like AI VR type stuff.
But then there are other things. So with that scene, like before they get off the like get off the ride, or they all force up the lap safety rail or whatever, which just shows, because like Hammond has this big rehearsed, he even has lines, which I'm not sure what his plan there was, if he's going to personally be present for every one of these tours, or if this is just something for like investors or major people to see.
It could be for investors, because they're still not sure who they want to market to, and that comes up in the dinner where they're like, we could mark this at like $3,000 a pop, and then Hammond is like, I kind of want it available for everybody, kind of like Disney World, and then he's like, and then the lawyer's like, sure, we can have a coupon day.
Yeah, right.
Like, that lawyer guy is the most out for money, even more so than Hammond, it seems.
But in that scene where they all force the rails off, I mean, that's something that comes up over and over again. Like when they all get out of cars, when they all, like, even the humans are not like, you can't contain the humans. Why would you think you can contain the dinosaurs? I mean, So it kind of reminds me of like, because everything's supposed to be like really controlled, and
nature is gonna want to reject it.
Right. Yeah. So they're like, we want to see the geneticist doing the thing over there, and they all force up the rails and go do that. And then we see Dr. Wu and the egg hatching.
Right. And so the egg hatching, I don't actually know how the eggs start is a big thing. Like, because if they're not actually laid, like I suppose they start off like in a vial.
Which came first, the chicken or the egg? I don't
know. Fucking the dino DNA guy. That's what came first. The mosquito and the amber came first.
Yeah.
But
so they must need. Oh yeah, I get what you're saying though, because if we're doing eggs, then we probably need. Or no, wait.
It probably starts off like in a petri dish of some sort.
Yeah, got it.
But I don't know what an egg that tiny that ends up being that big looks like when it's that tiny.
Yeah, no, that's a really interesting point. I never even thought about the chicken or the egg here. Like that's a big, I don't know.
You know what came first? The fucking Easter Bunny. That's what came first.
Hammond. He laid those eggs.
Henry Wu, BD Wong, future villain of at least kind of both of the Jurassic Worlds, because I think he's in the first Jurassic World, but he really becomes the villain in the second.
Yep.
And I did not see the second Jurassic World. They're looking at these eggs hatching, and like, there's this robot arm that rotates the eggs every so often, just like any normal dinosaur like mother would, and one starts wiggling and it's about to hatch, and then Hammond is like, why didn't you tell me? I'm personally here for every hatchling on the park, because it's a fucking Easter Bunny. And then he cares about this shit, and then the baby hatches, and like it's an iconic scene. Another one, there's got to be at least like 3 major iconic scenes in this movie alone.
There's so many. I mean, that
at least 3 that, like, if you were to make like a half-hour sizzle reel of like the most iconic scenes in the history of cinema, like this movie probably has like 3 of them.
And so everything in that, I mean, you can see he thinks of himself as sort of the father of these, and then you have that, the music is another thing where you have like almost this like choral piece where it's like, ooh, where it's kind of like, you're obviously
it's Prometheus-ish.
Right, yeah, I mean, he's playing God, and that's exactly, that music, puts that idea and so does Hammond, being present for their birthing. And then, Malcolm basically says that, he has this big speech, which at the time maybe seems ridiculous, because like Wu's talking about how they're all female, and Malcolm's saying, oh, well, you can't possibly contain life. And at that moment, you're like, well, what are they going to, and Wu even highlights the ridiculousness of what he's trying to say. It's like, well, you're saying that an all female species is going to somehow reproduce. And he's like,
and that's when he basically brings up the point, life finds a way, because like even
breaks through barriers and boundaries, and
I mean, there's
very literally in this movie we see
there are a ton of theories of how like life started. Like, although space is space, like tardigrades, which are like these super tiny little fucking, they're protists.
Something like space teddy bears or something.
They call them space cows or something like that.
Yeah, something like that.
But basically, they could live in space, and they're living biological creatures, and like whatever they eat, they, poop, and then poop can turn into bacteria, and bacteria can turn into life. Like, as long as that bacteria is
isn't
like
that a
stable enough.
comforting thought? Everything is born of shit.
Yeah.
So-
Well, everything's born, like, it's also, everything's like born of star stuff. It's like we're all star stuff and shit at the same time.
Yeah, see,
You know what I mean?
You can guess which one people are going to latch on to more. It's like, we're all stardust. It's like, yeah, that we're all shit. Totally. Like, that's always at the back of my mind. Like, so come from shit we came into shit we return, and like, so that's my philosophy. But God.
So yeah, the whole thing, Malcolm's very skeptical. He says life finds a way. They do feeding outside of like the tour center, where they meet they all meet the Australian guy Muldoon.
Yeah, he's like, they should all be destroyed.
Yeah, and he's definitely, like, you could tell, like, he was like probably like a big game hunter in like either like South America, Australia, or sorry, South Africa, Australia, probably both.
Right.
So that's why he has like these like hunting strategies, and he's just really good at his job in that way. So he's like the main, like, I guess I would call him a game warden, but like that's like the best thing I could call it. Like, it's like this, like, sort of,
when you get the sense that Hammond looked for exactly like that guy, somebody who's, the whole life. I mean, he must be like the best big game hunter in the world or something. And
probably like killed a lion with his bare hands or some shit.
Right.
Yeah, that guy is like very mistrusting. He's like, these velociraptors are really smart. They keep like prodding at the fence, and every time they find different spots and find the weaker spots.
Right,
so they
never
remember.
retry the same spot on the fence, so which is a clear indication they remember. So they never test the same spot for a weakness twice, which, so then you have the "they remember," line or whatever. Yeah. And he says you can look at the main female, and like you can see in her eyes she's working things out, and it's all, we don't see them because they're enshrouded in the foliage. So again, we just see the cow being, or the bull or whatever, being lowered down into the pen, and then thrashing, and then the bloody chains and tarp are lifted. I mean, it's all just really well done in building dread or whatever.
And he starts off that scene too by just saying they should all be killed.
Yeah,
but
I don't think he's joking.
It comes off as a joke. Like, I think Hammond is like, ha 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 ha.
Right.
But he's like, no.
Right.
They're too smart.
I'm here to do the job and whatever.
How about we just stick with the pretty plant eaters and the triceratops and those guys? Why not? Because I mean, they're more sustainable too. So because then you just need to worry about the plant life, and then the plant eaters, and then you don't have to worry about the carnivores fucking eating the other dinosaurs.
Right.
And wasting valuable assets in that way, because like big enough herds of wolves can snuff out an entire like population of deer in no time if it's big enough.
I'm trying to think. Well, and it's a nice segue actually, now that I think about it, because like we go from the egg hatching, and he's like, what species is this velociraptor? Then we go to the velociraptor pen. Then Hammond comes along and he's like, they're serving Chilean sea bass, and this is contrasted with feeding time, and you can see later Sattler's looking down at her Chilean sea bass with like this look of disgust, like she's thinking about the earlier feeding, and so like those are some nice jumps from sequence to sequence. Everything's kind of interrelated.
So Alan, Ellie, and Malcolm all decide that they're not gonna sign off.
Yeah, and the lawyer is just a total kiss ass.
Right? Yeah, the lawyer's a kiss ass. He wants to make money. He's ready. He's on board.
Yeah.
But I think Ellie said that they're playing God and had no discipline. You're playing God. There's no discipline to this place. Like, they see the signs where, not everything is super well coordinated and everything. Like, they could kind of like see the writing on the wall in some ways. And then Malcolm said that dinosaurs had their shot, and how can you assume that you can control them now? Because like nature decided, you know what, this is the dinosaurs' time. because Hammond brings up like, why not, like, if I was bringing back condors in California, because like condors are, a greatly endangered giant ancient bird that are pretty cool if you learn about them. That like I think are still hanging on. I think they're doing a little better. I think they're still technically endangered though. But he was like, Hammond's like, you wouldn't be saying all this if we were trying to restore the condor population. And then he's like, well, condors are like endangered because of like, building dams and stuff like that, and like sapping agriculture.
Which I thought was, I think Hammond made a really good point, and it was one of the only ones that I think really came up against Malcolm. But when you think of it, I suppose, that makes sense for Malcolm to say, because I think him talking about dams and human intervention it actually probably just serves to exemplify everything he's talking about. That we're so but he's saying this isn't that.
He said this isn't that dinosaurs had their shot, and then nature decided, you're done. You're going to become chickens now.
You could argue that humanity building all those dams and everything is nature in a way.
Yeah, a lot of people. That's one thing that I think about a lot, is that like people want to like divide the natural and the unnatural world with like nature and the human world, but humans are a part of nature. So one may conclude that it was always going to happen this way if you had a primate this intelligent, you know what I mean? That would develop in this certain way, that they would build dwellings, and they would, make the dwellings better, and then they would.
And certain animals, like beavers build dams. So because it's not like there aren't animals. Every animal does infect its local environment, and they'll wipe out entire populations, same as we will. I don't know, like the megalodon or whatever ate all the fucking, what were those whales, and they went extinct because they killed off the whale population, and so they couldn't survive. And it's like, I don't know why I'm thinking of the megalodon before anything else, but like we were saying,
like wolves can like sap out their own population of like herbivores that they would be eating, if they eat too many at once, basically. And and then Malcolm brings up you're so preoccupied with whether or not they didn't stop to think if they should. And Grant finishes off with his point that dinosaurs and man are brought together, and there's like 65 million years apart. Evolution, and he's basically, he's not as skeptical as Ian Malcolm, but
he doesn't want to jump to any conclusions.
But he's still like, you have no idea what you can expect. Like that was his thing. Like the chaos theory guy, Malcolm, is basically like, no, this shit's gonna go wrong. Like, I guarantee it's gonna go wrong. And then basically I think Sadler and Grant basically come down to, well, it could go very wrong, it could go fine, but the idea is it's so unknowable right now that like let's not be hasty.
So there's kind of this, it's something that's really interesting about the movie, because I hadn't watched it in a number of years, like probably 5 or more, I'm thinking, but was like, so much of this is communicated visually, that, and then characters end up saying exactly what you're thinking. But as far as things breaking out of boundaries and whatever, but with the Velociraptor scene hatching out of the egg, that's what that whole moment is. It's a Velociraptor face to face with a human for the front. But as far as Malcolm's speech, just because I feel like it's the heart of the movie, like I'm trying to remember what he says. It's like, the problem is that, you didn't, because Hammond's like, how can we not stand in the light of discovery, and how can we stand in the light of discovery and not act? Malcolm says, what's so great about discovery? It's a violent, penetrative act that scars what it explores. And I'm trying to think, which reminds me of that quote. I'm trying to think, I think he was a physicist who said, nothing observed is unaffected by the observer, and like, okay. But I don't actually know if he said that after Jurassic Park or not. But I just know it's a famous physicist. But what else does Malcolm say? It's like, and this is what I agree with hugely. Like when we start talking about like AI and just all these things, where he says, the problem is that your people didn't earn the knowledge. You just took what other people had done and you took the next step. You didn't earn it.
And that's why there's no discipline to it, because there was no
responsibility.
Yeah, like they did not build the groundwork. They did not have a mission statement of like, when we make these discoveries, we're going to use them for ethical purposes or purely discovery purposes. Whereas they're already being commercialized. They have a whole section of lunchboxes all set. Like,
said, like before you even knew what you had, you're selling it. You're slapping a label on it, a lunchbox. Slapping a label on a lunchbox, and you're selling it. Selling is pounding his hand on the table. But it's so completely true and timelessly, and so well put. But I mean, timelessly relevant. But I mean, because if you listen to these AI people, it's like it's horrifying. There's no. They're like, well, if they all kill us, then that's what's que sera, sera. Robots will inherit the earth. It's not our no responsibility, no questioning. It's just natural. And you hear that time and again from every every time. It's like, if there is something that we can do, we do it. It's like there's, and that's just beyond question. They're like, because it's inevitable. It's not like we can, so that's always used as the rationalization that, discovery is inevitable and somebody else will do it and you can't stop progress and all that. But yeah, these AI people, they're literally like, well, if robots kill us, like, well, then robots are the dominant species and they deserve it. It's Darwinism and whatever, it's like, okay, and like, or even Zuckerberg talking about, Facebook, he's like, well, I guess I hope it didn't destroy natural, or human civilization. I mean, that'd be a bummer. But
okay,
that whole dinner conversation, it's the heart of the movie. It's what's missing from later installments, and it's great and timelessly applicable. I mean, yeah. But okay, there.
And
I guess
well acted by pretty much everybody throughout too.
The adults talking, and then we're introduced to the kids. I think after that. So
the lawyer is still down, and then like you just said, Hammond goes down, and he's like, "Kids," and hugs his grandkids, and his care for his grandkids, I think, although he's a fucking idiot later on in the movie with like just letting them go out into like dangerous scenarios, it does humanize him, so that like he is not just. I feel like the villain that I remember that isn't BD Wong in the first Jurassic World was pretty two-dimensional until like.
Isn't it the dumbass dude who
I think it's the guy that got in the helicopter, and like that was the most redemptive that the guy got.
I thought if you're talking about the US guy who wants to use them as weapons.
Oh yeah, they weaponized him. Yeah, he was two-dimensional the whole time, I think.
But Fallen Kingdom does that. They pursue that avenue of like trained dinosaurs being weaponized. So I guess that's different from Lost World, but idiotic completely, and just hate that. I mean, slightly better than the humanoid dinosaur plan for Jurassic Park 4 originally, but I think we talked about that in another thing. But yeah, it's just, so I don't know, but okay. The kids.
But yeah, so the grandkids' names are Tim and Lex.
Yep.
Lex is the older of the two.
Sister,
she is like very good at computers, like, because Tim is like, oh, you're always on your computer, you're not adventurous, you don't like going outside, all that stuff. And there's like brother and sister prodding. But her computer knowledge comes in later. And then Tim, he actually cares about dinosaurs and reads up all about them, and probably fucking
has read Grant's books and
probably worships his grandpa and has read Grant's books, and like is just like he knows the dinosaurs as good as anyone. The kid actor that played Tim would go on to be in The Social Network.
Oh, really?
Yeah, he has a really small part in it, and he's also in Jersey Boys, which is not a good movie. They're about to go on to a tour with the kids, and Laura Dern's character Sadler is like, hey Alan, why don't you sit with the kids, because she wants him to start getting used to kids, because that's like one of his big like non-committal things is like, I don't want kids, they smell and they're annoying and blah blah blah. And we're back in like the headquarters, like the computer section of Jurassic Park, where they're looking at the weather reports and they're like, oh, there's going to be a hurricane soon. So that's where they kind of clue the audience into that a hurricane is coming. And there actually was a real hurricane that happened during the filming of Jurassic Park. And Jurassic Park, like 1993 was like the most crazy year for Spielberg ever, because Jurassic Park was released in the summer of 93. And then Schindler's List was released in either November or December.
God, I never made the connection that those two movies came out the same year.
Well, like he said that like he literally has like gaps where he doesn't remember shit because he was working on post-production of Jurassic Park. So like the CGI and stuff of Jurassic Park while they were shooting Schindler's List. And then the way he did
tonal fucking whiplash.
The way he described it was he was like, and at some point, like a nuclear bomb went off in my head, and he honestly doesn't remember much else. It's one of the funnest movies he ever made.
Easily the most
depressing, probably the most
Munich, but that doesn't even come close to like Schindler's List. So I mean,
but yeah, so hurricane's coming, and then there's actually 2 times in which Samuel L. Jackson says, "Hold on to your butts," and this is the first one.
Oh, really?
Yes, he's like, "Hold on to your butts," and then he activates the tour. Jackson's like very professional. It's his last name is Arnold in the movie because he's Mr. Arnold. Yeah, I mean, it would have been before Pulp Fiction, and Pulp Fiction was what really put him on the map. He had small parts in a bunch of Spike Lee movies, like he was in Do the Right Thing. But yeah, so this is early in his career, and you know, Dennis is a slob. He's complaining all the time. He's asking for more money when he's clearly one of the worst workers there. The only leverage he has is he's good at code.
He's the worst worker in terms of like a work ethic, you know, or whatever. But yeah, I mean, like, but he's unfortunately kind of indispensable, and Hammond recognizes that. Yeah, without Nedry, they're fucked. So
you see some animosity between the two, Samuel L. Jackson and Dennis.
He's primarily going up against, I think, Hammond, you know, because like, you know, Hammond's the one who's like, I'm not going to get into another financial debate with you, Dennis. You know, it's like that those are your problems, you know.
Yeah.
And so, yeah.
So we cut back to the start of the tour, and it starts with like Dilophosaurus, which ends up being the spitter.
Yeah. We don't see it.
Yeah. I think that's something where they took a liberty where it's no one could tell if Dilophosaurus like spat in real life back in the day, but they add that, I think, and I think a reason they add that is they want like a scary scene that they could still pull off in a PG-13 movie.
Right.
You know what I mean? Where every other scary animal is like eating people. And you already have one scene where the T-Rex eats a guy. Maybe it might be too much to have Dennis get eaten like visibly that way. But it might be better to be like spit.
It is much more graphic in the book. You know, his guts are everywhere and all that shit. You know, so like
that makes sense. Yeah. So they use the spit as kind of like a veil to be like, hey, this is scary, but it's not gonna really fuck a kid up. You know what I mean? Like.
But all right, then it's exactly what's kind of on your mind, but then the character says it, Malcolm says it, and dinosaurs don't abide park schedules, you know. It's right. I mean, so again, it's all of this was supposed to be perfect and very controlled, and even the cars are on a rail. Again, I mean, we have the scene a little later where everybody jumps out of the car, and you know, like so what's his name talks about getting locking mechanisms in the cars, but I was thinking, well, that might be a sort of a safety code problem too. So I'm thinking maybe a bus or a tram or something would have made more sense, but I don't know. Maybe it's a work in progress. But,
it could be. But this is when we get Malcolm's not certain that Ellie and Alan are, you know, boyfriend, girlfriend, which honestly, as kids, we clearly weren't certain of that either.
Some of it's starting to make, because I suppose there's a bit of
You never see him kiss is the big thing.
Right.
Like, I think the entire movie, I don't think you see him kiss.
No. And I don't think anything was lost, by not.
Yeah, it's not a love story.
Right. And they're often separated and, everything. So, which, I mean,
right here. So Malcolm's definitely flirting with Ellie and doing like explaining chaos theory with like a drop of water on her hand. And, one would think that if you drop the water in the same place that it would go there, that would go down, it would run down the same spot.
It's not a perfect one because they're in a vehicle and everything. So that affects, but he's clearly using it as an excuse to,
like hold her hand. And he even like sneaks stroking her hair too.
But things don't ultimately work out for him because as he, chaos theory is exemplified because I think it's Grant jumps out of the vehicle. Then Sattler follows and then he's left alone talking to himself, as he says. And he's like, there you go, chaos theory.
Yeah. And they go, and the reason they jump out is because they go and see this Triceratops that's sick. And this was a practical effect where they created a Triceratops. And I think they said they had at least 3, maybe 4 workers inside the Triceratops.
Where did they filmed in Hawaii. So I'm like, it's got to probably suck. But the other thing I had wanted to mention earlier was like, Sattler as being a paleobotanist, it does come up and is relevant to the script, which I liked. And she brought that up at the dinner table that you have poisonous plants in like the lobby and stuff. I mean, you pick them because they look pretty, she says, I think. So here she senses that it's eaten something that it's made it sick because she's talking to one of the technicians, which is another thing I like about the movies, that we encounter technicians all over the park. So it's not just these characters. Yeah, so he says it happens like once every 6 weeks or something like that, that it'll fall ill. And then they do the flashlight test to see that its eyes are dilating, and just things like this. So
yeah, they find some sores on its tongue.
Yeah, right.
And then they go around looking through some plants, and then they go to more like hurricane talk real quick back in the computer lab. And then the scene after the computer lab,
you start to see waves actually crashing onto the seawall or whatever.
And the scene after the computer lab is when you have Malcolm doing that's one big pile of shit scene. And she's digging through the shit, looking for stuff. I don't think they ever actually deduced exactly what was wrong with it. Because they were like, well, it's not that plant. What could it be? And then
she sticks around to work it out. And this is definitely not going how I think Malcolm was hoping the next 5 minutes would go. She's digging around it. I think he's
digging around in dino doo-doo. And also you start hearing thunder in the background too. So the hurricane is coming. It's like one of those like summer where the thunderstorm hasn't hit just yet, but the lighting is right. Yeah.
Gray out. Yeah. So things are taking kind of just a generally ominous turn, I mean, with the sick dinosaur and just what happens next. I think we're in the computer room again.
Yeah, they're in the computer room, and then they cancel it. They're like, let's bring them back, because they're already mad that they got out of the door or out of the cars, like you said earlier. We should have locking mechanisms. This has been a shit show, literally. And then so that's when Sam Jackson's like, John, it could have been a lot worse.
Yeah, which is an interesting line to me, because it's like, okay, if they're recognizing just how thin the line is between like disaster here, like that's kind of like, what are you doing?
Well, it's still in such a prototypical phase too, you know what I mean? Because it still hasn't been approved.
I'm trying to remember if something's mentioned in the movie about like how he's keeping this under wraps. I mean, I suppose people have NDAs or something, but fucking dinosaurs. Well, obviously it's not, because there's another corporation that's aware of.
They have a small staff. I would say like some 25 people. Dennis says that he has to debug the phone systems, and some locking systems may go on and off for the next half hour or so.
That was the thing. So he gave Dodson shit, for like, where you try to be a secret agent. But then when it's Nedry's turn, he has this big over rehearsed explanation for like, it's I've got the phones, and anybody want anything for the vending machine? Because I'm hungry. I'm going to get that's like that kind of thing, and everybody's just like, okay, yeah, whatever, Nedry, like so.
And then basically he steals the embryos because the door like locking systems and security systems are shut down.
It just shows what a selfish fuck he is. I mean, because like now everybody's compromised.
And in doing that, one of the
Yeah.
systems that shuts down is the van stops.
Yep.
And it happens to stop right next to the T-Rex, which they had driven by earlier and dropped the goat in, but they waited and nothing was happening. So they went over, and then that's when they saw the Triceratops, and then they are doubling back, and now they're on their way back, and they're near the T-Rex again.
All right, so Nedry, at this point, he goes to the research lab, which is abandoned right now because all the researchers got onto the ships that are leaving. That's a big, so he has to do all this in like 15 minutes or whatever because the ships have to take off. He's got a guy on the inside that's or whatever. So, but somebody on the bridge, not the captain, but whatever, who's going to try to delay the captain on his behalf, but whatever. So, and he times his stopwatch in sync with the deactivation of the security cameras. So it's all really tense, even though Nedry's a total dick. Like you do feel that suspense. Like, I mean, but so it's a perspective thing. But yeah, so he runs to the research lab to get these vials and put in the barbasol can that we talked about earlier. Because it's got a false bottom and whatever. And
and he does a very shit job of trying to escape. He fucks up a sign to the dock,
so
like
loses his direction totally.
Yeah, his escape is intercut with the most famous scene of the movie. I would argue, the T-Rex scene. So he's escaping. He fucks up a sign. He eventually just crashes. He gets a little bit lucky because he actually crashes kind of close to a dock because he sees
sign,
because he goes off the cliff or whatever, and then he actually sees like, oh shit, there's a sign. So
I saw this time that he actually looks at his watch and says he still has time. I don't know if he's being delusional about that or if he seems to legitimately think he can still make it. So it feels like so much time has passed because we're cutting between the T-Rex scene and this that you're like, oh god, the ship's way gone, but who knows? So I mean,
right. And so he gets the tow cable, wraps around a tree, and then he starts to see a Dilophosaurus. And it's not just Spielberg, but I feel like in most Spielberg movies, like if you're a dick to animals or if you're just being like a dick to something, like you kind of get what you get, you get what you deserve or whatever. So he calls the Dilophosaurus stupid because it won't play fetch.
Yeah, he's like, no wonder you went extinct.
He climbs up like the waterfall area and then gets spat on in the face. Had explained earlier in this movie that the spit turns you blind and then they basically eat you.
So he falls on his back and then we follow the barbasol can down the water.
Oh,
and
there's also a classic banana slip sound.
Oh, is there?
It's intentional. It's funny.
Right. Follow the barbasol can down. There's this kind of like great visual, like, I don't know, like metaphor of it being buried in the mud all over again, which is a nice touch. But anyway, so we do cut away from Nedry. I suppose in that time, the dinosaur could have gotten into the Jeep, but the question is, why the fuck would it do that when he's already on his back and in distress,
Yeah.
So that's one of those inconsistencies.
They do that to keep it a PG-13 movie so they can cover the glass with ink.
Is you could just have the Dilophosaurus attack him and then follow the barbasol can down, and then we could actually have like the red blood in the water, like,
yeah, that could be.
Right. I mean, yeah, you could obscure it with maybe a car door initially, or something like that. Because it is just a little, like, why is it in the fucking Jeep? Why didn't it attack? But then again, it is kind of playing with him when we first encounter it. Now that I think about it, like it doesn't immediately attack him. You could probably give it a pass, but
like you said, it's like a good touch that it's like buried back within the mud, within like sort of like beginnings of life where
it's kind of like an easy come, easy go thing too. I mean, it's from whence it came, modern and cutting edge technology is just going to be
like the most sort of artificial form of nature just being like churned back within like the most basic form of nature, what I mean? Like water and dirt. It means we're all shit and we're all star stuff.
Yep.
Now, as this is happening, the famous T-Rex scene is happening, and it kicks off where, it actually kicks off where Malcolm is talking with Alan about, he's like, is Dr. Sadler available? And then Malcolm actually like apologizes, and then like even Sam Neill like hands him like his canteen for water and stuff, and
Yeah.
they bury the hatchet if there even was too much of a hatchet to bury.
Yeah, I mean, they're very different personality types, but I mean, it's they're not really rivals or anything.
Malcolm explains he's had like 4 divorces or some shit
Yeah.
like that. He's always looking for a new former Mrs.
Yeah,
Malcolm.
right. Yeah.
Then there's the famous water cup scene,
Which was really cool, actually, because I these desk speakers or whatever, and I had my coffee sitting on the desk, and it actually was the vibrations. It was really cool.
This is like probably like the scariest it got for me watching movies for like a while when I was like really little. I mean, because it is kind of scary, and like I don't know, Jurassic Park used to scare me more than maybe even Jaws. Just
really?
because
Jaws would frighten me a lot more, but
just because like I grew up on a farm, so like you're dealing with like cages and like, the cows are out and this and that, and they're so big at the time, and if you're just a little kid, like it's scary.
Jaws really, that scared the shit. It still scares the shit out of me, actually. So,
but basically, I'm just saying,
which makes no sense, because like you said, at least there's a legitimacy to your fear because you're on a farm and you're rational. There are cages. Mine, I've never been on a beach. There's no reason to be afraid
never
of
been
Jaws.
on the beach.
Well, I mean, I guess I have now, but like at the time, like I never seen the ocean. Like, what the hell am I frightened of?
But and then you see the T-Rex because the electric fences are off, so you see the T-Rex leaning against the fence and it going down, which I don't know. Like, there's a ravine. Like,
that's the big another thing here.
Does it fucking jump? Like,
and it makes sense for it to. So it's
or does it come off the it doesn't come off the opposite side though, right?
Yeah, because I really
they fall down the same side it came off of.
That's the thing. So I really try to keep an eye on that, because like so the elevation of it, like the car goes over where the T-Rex came in, so it just doesn't make any sense. It does make sense to keep this at an elevation so that doesn't happen, but it somehow happens anyway, because like that height is like he's probably taller than the T-Rex, so it just doesn't. And then geographically, I was trying to keep an eye out for like if there is a slope, like a massive like. And I'm trying to think if there was anything more to that, but
they establish the T-Rex coming in like bit by bit, where it's like it starts off with it's like claw, like kind of touching the electric fence and nothing happens, and then
I think it's introduced where we see the head coming out of the foliage, and that's then we don't see much else of it until we see the whole thing, and then you're like, holy shit, because it's and how small those Jeeps are, it's right in the middle of them, it's right there, it's like, that was a great scene.
And this is when the lawyer runs immediately like a fucking coward and sits in the toilet.
When you gotta go, from Malcolm,
And then Alan is telling Malcolm, keep still, they sense movement. They won't notice shit. Don't really know why the fuck Lex wanted to go grab a flashlight.
That was okay, because she doesn't know that, so she probably thinks she's being smart trying to signal the other car, but Tim knows that they track with, and so he's trying to get her to shut it off.
What do you think she's trying to do?
I think she was trying to be smart and like signal the other car, the way she was waving it around, or maybe she's just trying to see it out there, because we do see the windows are fogged up and it's dark.
Yeah, maybe she didn't exactly see what it was, because
Tim immediately knows the problem. Like he because he loves all this stuff, so like he knows that it tracks movement. He's like, shut it off. And Grant's saying the same thing in the other car.
And I know this scene used a combination of CG, practical effects, and
that was animatronics for the head, right?
And animatronics. Stan Winston did the T-Rex. Stan Winston's like a legend, right? Okay, so Stan Winston has won 4 Academy Awards. Things that he did, or at least had something to do with The Thing.
Wow. Okay, yeah.
He did
great.
He did The Thing, The Terminator, Starman, Aliens, not Alien, but Aliens, Predator.
Oh, all right.
Edward Scissorhands, Predator 2, Terminator 2, Batman Returns, Jurassic Park, Tank Girl.
Oh, the peak of his career.
Lost World, Small Soldiers.
Oh yeah, I saw that as a kid.
Lake Placid, Galaxy Quest, Pearl Harbor, AI, artificial intelligence.
Oh, he's a Spielberg likes him, obviously.
Yeah, him and Cameron. Jurassic
Yeah.
Park 3, Big Fish, Terminator 3, Constantine, Zathura, War of the Worlds, Doom.
Zathura was like a spiritual successor to Jumanji, I think. Or
Okay, this is a weird 3 movies in a row. Ready? What? Okay, so it's 8 Below, The Shaggy Dog, and The Benchwarmers.
Okay. Well, wait, the Shaggy Dog? So 8 Below was like dog sledders, right? So there's a theme of dogs for 2 movies, and then Benchwarmers. Okay. I'm trying to think where he would have even gotten any work in Benchwarmers. That's just a baseball movie, right?
Yeah.
Or like with Napoleon Dynamite.
I don't know. He might have done like some bowl cuts for David Spade. And then he did Iron Man, Kingdom of the Crystal Skull, Terminator Salvation. He did something with Avatar, a little bit in Shutter Island, and then in Theron. I haven't heard that, but that's his last movie, and then he died.
Oh, all right.
So,
career.
So long story short, Stan Winston's a fucking like brilliant dude. He did Aliens, not Alien, and then he
which
did
I think
Predator.
I was talking about just how amazing those effects were, and then The Thing is just fucking incredible.
He did Predator, The Thing, obviously Jurassic Park. So, and I'm not exactly sure how much he had to do with Avatar, but it doesn't sound like he had a ton to do. Maybe just because there's not a lot of practical effects involved. But maybe he helped with some of the giant art
robot suits. I don't think those were CG. I think they actually built them. Those
they had some of that was real.
Yeah.
At least like the cockpits.
Right. So that could be what it was.
But yeah, so she grabs a flashlight, Lex does, and I think she's just trying to see what's going on, but it's attracting the T-Rex, and the T-Rex basically like just plows through the roof of the Jeep, which is just a glass roof.
Well, and I like that scene too, just because like they're so preoccupied with turning off the flashlight that like, well, the T-Rex, and you become absorbed by that, just the urgency of trying to turn the thing off. They're like, like they both kind of forget about the whole reason we're trying, which is the T-Rex, which then comes right down to and there's that realization. They're both like, oh shit, like because they, so. And it's a glass roof, so that's why, which is relevant to what happens a little later. But so the glass roof comes down on them, and that's all that's separating them from the T-Rex, and they're sliding all over, and
the T-Rex really goes at the car as though it's just like a big like cow or something that it's trying to eat, where it's like it attacks through the top and then it tips it over and tries to like eat at its underbelly.
The tire off and I mean and those kids are being like crushed down into the mud, and it's like it's not like the kids are in danger. It's like holy shit, they're about to die a very horrible death.
Grant opens up a box of flares, and he uses a flare and then kind of gets its attention and tries to throw it, but it doesn't leave immediately. And then Malcolm uses a flare. He's like, get the kids. And like Malcolm runs with it, which actually, like we said a little bit earlier, Jeff Goldblum brought this to Spielberg, and it ends up being a good idea because I don't think Spielberg would have done it if he didn't think it was a good idea. Like he wouldn't just acquiesce to.
Well, and that car chase sequence that happens later wouldn't have been, nearly as frightening because we have Goldblum, who's in the closest proximity to that T-Rex.
And I remember when I was a kid, like, and this kind of gives me like maybe an idea that like, maybe I have good judge and character because I always as a kid liked Malcolm the most.
And so did I actually.
And I was always like bummed. I was always like bummed when I thought he would die or something.
So I
was like, no, they shouldn't kill Malcolm. And So I was
Well, what did
always
you think
happy
of
that he
The
made it.
Lost World as a kid? Because I mean, like that's all him, Goldblum coming back and
I didn't
right?
watch Lost World nearly as
Oh,
much. I've watched it. It took me till like I was probably older than 10 to watch it. So
oh,
I didn't really have like a childhood experience with it. But yeah, I always liked Malcolm more. But nowadays, I kind of feel like I would rather be like Sam Neill as an old man than I would want to be Jeff Goldblum as an old man.
oh, well, yeah.
Just
I mean,
because,
I'm a huge Sam Neill fan, like so. I mean, but I think I liked Malcolm as a character a bit more as a kid.
oh, right, for
Yeah.
sure. But just nowadays, I'm like, Sam Neill is just out here chilling.
Well, he's got his own winery in where is it, Australia or whatever. It's called Two Paddocks, and I guess he's doing the acting thing still to keep the winery afloat. And he's like, kind of wishes it was the other way around, but it's not hugely successful. But like he and his wife just sit around and drink wine, and he does some acting to keep it together. So
Yeah, but Sam Neill, like he posted on Twitter sometime recently, like he was playing a
oh
ukulele.
yeah, I saw that. Yeah,
Yeah, he was doing all about that bass, and I'm like, I get you, Sam Neill. I think it took me a while, but I get you, Sam Neill. Also, Sam Neill, I believe this same year the movie was released was The Piano, which
oh
is a movie by Jane Campion. She's a New Zealand director. It's a really good movie. It's got Harvey Keitel and Holly Hunter, and it's Holly Hunter's best performance. I think it got her an Oscar, and I think she did deserve it. Like I don't think it was a case where the Academy waited for a movie
right.
that was or that was less deserving. I think they did kind of line this up where it's like this was her best movie. I don't care too much about what the Academy does, but I do when I agree with them. I'll say like, yeah, I agreed with them.
Sam Neill is being optioned as for the role of Bond. You can actually find footage of like a test reel or whatever that he did. But I think right around the time of Timothy Dalton's departure or whatever, but it ended up going to Brosnan.
Sam Neill's another one of those actors that probably could have got more work in, but I'm not really sure why he
He's
didn't.
great in horror. Like all of my favorite stuff that he's in has been horror stuff. Like Event Horizon and In the Mouth of it's In the Mouth of Madness, the John Carpenter one, and then he did just a lot of stuff. Daybreakers, that vampire one with like Ethan Hawke from Training Day, and then God, just a lot of stuff. He plays just like the worst piece of shit in like Peaky Blinders for the first couple seasons. And one that's sort of similar to this is with Willem Dafoe, came out in 2010 or 2011, called The Hunter.
Oh yeah.
And so that might be an interesting one as a follow-up. I mean, it's very different. It's not like super action-packed or anything, but it's about them finding like the last Tasmanian tiger in the world or whatever. And it's kind of a weird ethical dilemmas start to arise around or surround that. And it's a really good movie, very good. But yeah, so that might be something people might like. Not a lot of action though, but whatever.
So Malcolm, it makes sense in the scene too, because you would need more motion to attract the T-Rex than probably just throwing the flare.
Starting to kind of burn down, it looked like, by the time he tossed it. So he probably became the thing that it.
Yeah. Malcolm starts, running and uses himself as bait, and then he kind of throws it just a little bit late, but the T-Rex already has a bead on him. He doesn't get a chomp in, but he does end up like fucking, I think, slashing his leg or at least breaking his leg or something.
I watched the scene and saw it and noticed for a split second something I'd never seen before. So then I went back and I frame by framed it. Malcolm goes, he's somehow found himself. It's a stunt double, obviously. It's like you can see a few frames of the stunt double. He's got the glasses, but it's very clearly not Goldblum. But he's on like a wire or something. He's got his legs wrapped around the snout of the T-Rex as it goes crashing through the bathroom, and he just goes like flying on like a wire off of the snout of the T-Rex, and that gets buried in the debris. And
so it's kind of like he got hit by a car.
Yeah, basically.
It's like,
so he goes flying off the snout, and it looks like part of his boots in like the mouth of the thing a little bit, but yeah, because I did a frame by frame. And it does look a little ridiculous, but it's so brief that I'd never noticed it before. So yeah,
nice.
It's but like you said, it's like him getting hit by a car or bus, and he goes flying off and gets buried in the rubble, and then it's Gennaro, the lawyer who's on the shitter, and
the bathroom just falls apart for the lawyer, and then he gets eaten.
Yep.
And then so that's like the on-screen death of the movie.
Right.
Really.
Yeah, he gets that's the first one, I think, that
because there's only so many deaths like that you could probably manage in a PG-13 movie without
he's getting like thrashed around and shit, and so.
And later on when they go inspect the when Sadler
Nero, and then Sadler's in another place closer to the camera, she's like, I think this was too. I'm like,
Alan kind of starts getting the kids out of the car. Lex just like screams like her voice box apart. Because like the T-Rex is really fucking close. But then they kind of manage to like hide and maneuver behind the car as like it's spinning the car, because it still thinks that like the car is the dead thing that it should be eating, I think. So, because again, T-Rexes are stupid. But basically it ends up pushing the car off the ledge with Tim inside, and while they rappel.
Great set piece. And so Sam Neill starts to swing. They're using one of the cables from the fence, and then he has to have Lex grab onto the adjacent cable,
vine,
because the
or
car is
whatever
starting
it
to
is.
come down. Yeah, in time before the car with Tim still in it, which is really horrible, but they don't have a choice, like they ended up getting forced over that ledge and grabbing onto the cable, I think is how that went. And so they can't really get to Tim, who's still in the vehicle. And then, and then he's trying to like wall run or whatever and get Lex to grab the other cable, which he does just in time. But it's great, it's a super tense, really great scene. And then,
Right. And then this is actually when we would be cutting into the Dennis scene when Dennis dies. All right. Grant climbs the tree for Tim then. Well, it's also a nice scene quick here with Lex, because like he kind of sets Lex down and he's like, I'm gonna go get Tim now, and she's clearly fucking shell shocked.
Oh yeah, and like, he left us. Because Gennaro got out of the car and bolted for the bathroom.
And he's like, well, I'm not gonna leave you. Right. And it's like, oh, he's growing as a parent.
He still probably makes a couple bad calls though later on, like the electric fence joke or whatever. Like, I mean, it just, but he's learning. He's trying.
He's learning how to deal with kids. But he climbs up to go get Tim, and Tim's like, I puked. He's like, I won't tell anybody, whatever. Like, and then he grabs Tim, and then the truck starts breaking.
I don't even know how Tim's like, because his legs were pinned in the car when he went over, and then maybe, and then he could have gotten impaled by those trees. He could have.
Well, you don't necessarily, because like I've been pinned not by like something that heavy, but could like keep you from moving anywhere. Like you could be pinned by like a seat cushion or something that will put enough pressure on you that you can't move, but not necessarily break anything.
Okay.
Right,
so okay.
Like,
that makes sense.
So like that I do buy. Him kind of staying in the car falling down seems a little unlikely, but whatever.
He was in the back, so maybe the backs of the seats.
And he's and he probably grabbed onto some shit. I don't know.
I have no idea, but whatever. He's been through a ride.
And it falls all the way down as they scramble down the tree branches. I kind of think that they could have just rotated to the other side of the tree and been fine.
What I thought, but then looking at it, it's like, I don't know if there's really room for them to maneuver like that. So maybe scrambling down the tree, just from what I could tell upon rewatching it, was the only option.
Again, it's a lot of little nitpicks here, but every scene.
But they're ones I even thought of as a kid. Like, you're bringing up all the ones that were in my head too. So it's like, I mean, these are the ones that people know, but so talking.
Yeah, and every scene that these nitpicks are in are like such good scenes. Otherwise, that you forgive it.
Set piece. Like, this movie just has some of the best in any movie. Back to back. I mean, the car going over and then the car coming down the tree, and like it's. a lot.
The nitpicks are constantly worthy of forgiveness in this movie, and even in some bad movies or lesser movies than Jurassic Park, I'm willing to forgive some nitpicks.
Yeah.
But if like the overall story and everything else to go with it doesn't overcome the nitpicks, it just kind of adds on to it, and it kind of becomes,
they stack up, and
it stacks up, and then it just becomes an extra annoyance on top of an already like lesser movie, I suppose.
Right. But yeah, they make it to the bottom of the tree. The car comes down. Grant shields Tim, but luckily, because the glass roof of the car was destroyed, they actually get lucky.
Yeah.
And
they're like, we're back in the car again.
Yeah.
And then Ellie is looking for them on top. Some time has passed, like they've gotten the hell away from the T-Rex at this point.
Right.
But Ellie's looking for them, but she finds Malcolm, and that's where we get
But she actually goes down to the location of the car because she looks over and sees. And I'm like wondering, how did they rappel down that? What did they use? The cables? Did they use the?
I think they probably went. I would imagine they went around the long way, because
all the while we can hear the T-Rex, and I'm like, I know that you have to go investigate, but if I'm Malcolm, like, you guys are leaving me the fucking keys.
Yeah. I agree with that, but that's why he's like, hurry, we got to go now. We got to go.
I don't think it was going to take any short amount of time to get down there, right? I mean, so like, and there's the immediate danger of the T-Rex that we hear, so that was a little weird, but whatever. But I mean, but it's not like she wouldn't go investigate. I mean, and the whole reason the other dude is there is to recover Hammond's kid, so he has to, go check that out.
And they do see footprints, so they see that they're probably alive, but they're not sure what the fuck it is gonna come out of it. So Laura Dern and the Australian guy, or South African, that accent is a little similar. I think it's Australian though. They hop in the car and they drive away just in time to get away from the T-Rex. That's another good scene. And another reason that, like, it was good to keep Malcolm around, because that scene is definitely not as good without him.
Right. Well, because the danger is much more immediate. I mean, he's scrambling back, and he fucks up the stick shift or whatever, and like it just, like, I mean, it wouldn't have been nearly as tense without. I mean, because those two characters are going to be in the front seat, and it's just having him there.
And he manages like comic relief at the same time in a way, like compared to the other scenes we've seen in this movie, this is like a comic relief scene almost, where it's just like, must go faster.
Right. Yeah, he just has so many great, like when they find him buried under all the rubber. He's like, remind me to thank John for a lovely weekend, and just like he's got a million great lines in this one. So
one thing I thought was kind of clever, and I didn't really notice until this time, is they climb into a tree to go sleep in the tree, right? Sam Neill and the kids, and I was thinking, like, they see the brachiosauruses. But like, I just think it's a cool thing that they climb up into a tree again, because it's almost like de-evolution, right? They're thrown back 65 million years in the past, and primates, like, or monkeys, like basically mammals at the time of the dinosaurs, they were either like lemurs that lived up in the trees, or they were little rodents that lived in the ground, thrown back in a world with a more superior animal species on Earth. Like, mammals have to resort back to their roots of like living in the trees so they don't get eaten by a T-Rex.
Well, and that's the other thing. So Grant, who's like the most technologically illiterate of the lot, is quite well, surviving the longest with two kids in tow across the park, So I mean, he's useless with technology, but he does exceedingly well surviving in the park. So after all the technology fails, which, I mean, so he gets into a tug of war with one of the brachiosaurs or whatever, right? And they're like, I'm just thinking, I wouldn't do that up there in the tree, I might not.
Yeah, you could fall down. I think he wanted to pull it closer so that the kids could pet it.
Yeah, but that thing's fucking huge, and I'm like,
it's probably got the strength of like 10 bulldozers or something,
right.
Like,
so but whatever.
I'd agree there.
And then we get kind of our Temple of Doom moment with Lex, where she gets sneezed on by the sick brachiosaur, so Yeah.
And I know it's just never going to do anything again. Okay, yeah, that night there's the dinner scene where it's like Ellie versus Hammond, and they're at the opposite sides of the table.
Yeah.
And basically in that scene, Hammond talks about how he had a flea circus and he's always like wanted to like control that kind of stuff and kind of like just be
Well,
like,
and he's and he's kind of going through denial too, because it's like, he's like, I realize, everything was too automated, which you could see at a glance was the case. Like next time we might, like,
yeah. He says
not,
it's all correctable.
right. Yeah. So
And then she said, like, you never had control to begin with. You didn't even have control of your employees. You didn't have control
of the park. Sorry, that was, I don't know. But yeah, no, I mean, of even the tourists, them. I mean, they're like I said, I mean, they're breaking the safety bars, they're jumping out of the cars, they're doing what they want, going where they want, and yeah. So
if you can't control your own employees or the tourists, how can you control dinosaurs? And then and then the dino boogers scene happens that morning, and then start walking through the woods, and they find
Grant says he'll stay up all night to because Lex doesn't want to fall asleep, but he fell asleep, so he lied. He's a bad parent.
But yeah, they see a new like nest of dinosaur eggs, and it's not supposed to be there because all the dinosaurs are supposed to be female.
They look a little plasticky, I noticed this time. Like
yeah.
So that's all that nice detail that I get on the monitor.
And then he kind of rationalizes it. Well, frogs in an ace like can kind of become like sort of asexual or change their gender at will if the environment around them calls for it.
And so again, that's one of those scenes where it's like it's all Sam Neill selling it, because like he does really sell like he's working it out. But if he can work it out that quickly in such a short period of time to account for how this could have possibly happened, shouldn't other people have been able to
they probably shouldn't have used frogs as the missing link,
right? Because it takes him all of like 30 seconds to work out how this went wrong and how they were able to right. So it works, the scene works, but just if you think about it, it's like, well, maybe people didn't want to see it. I don't know. They have another thing called like what the lysine contingency, where they deprive dinosaurs. But I'm like, you're already doing that, right? Like, because nobody's out there feeding or injecting the TRex with amino acids or whatever.
Yeah, I didn't fully understand that either.
I know there's an explanation in the Lost World as that like they adapt beyond it or something or somehow, but I know they do give a reason, but I can't remember.
Yeah, so, the point I think.
But here it's like that contingency is already in effect, like because nobody's around to inject them or whatever it is they do, feed them or I don't know. So because it sounded like they had a plan or something like the lysine contingency to them.
Right. Maybe they provide it through plant life though. I don't know. Like, you know
Actually,
what I mean?
That might be the the Lost World. I think they were saying they're like feeding off of things, but then that makes no sense, because if you have the plant life around that, like, well, then you should have seen that this was never going to be this contingency was never. But then again, they don't seem to know a lot about the plant.
The plant life is just on that island. It wouldn't be on another island.
Oh, that was the other island, right? But then maybe they would have overlooked that, because Sattler even says that like you don't even know what some of these plants are. So it's possible they overlooked that because they're just
maybe they pump the cows full of it. I don't know.
Yeah, and then it was TRex, or the carnivores eat the herbivores, and that's how they get it. So the herbivores eat the plants, and
but I think they try to keep the carnivores caged away from the herbivores and just feed the carnivores normal livestock like goats and cows.
Oh yeah, but I mean, as far as the Lost World and how they're surviving, because like you brought it. Yeah, so you're right. I think that the herbivores eat plants that have lysine, which is a big. Obviously, they're overlooking something there, but Sattler says that they don't seem to know much about their plants, and then the carnivores eat the herbivores, and that's how that works.
I don't know much about that contingency, so if we fucked any of that up, let us know in the comments. We probably did. Anyway, the point being, life found a way. There's eggs. It's fucking Easter. Deal with it. Okay, so then after they give the point that like life finds a way, that's when we get the famous scene of Ian liquid sex Malcolm with his
he's doing
chest.
the Burt Reynolds pose, right?
Yes, he's doing the Burt Reynolds pose. You know,
no bearskin rug. I think it's actually just a bunch of files and schematics, but you know, that's what a mathematician would look sexy on. So, you know, but
we can't all be Ian Malcolm, but we can sure as hell try. So they decide to shut down the system and try to do a restart because that'll get the phones back online in
Sam
theory.
Jackson doesn't want to do it because I'm sure he's worried this is going to wipe all of his work. Like, I mean, and
they hadn't tried it before, and that's just another example of how unprepared they were. But and that's when we get the second hold on to your butts.
Yeah, he flips the switch off and everything goes dark, and then
but he does see in one monitor that it is rebooting. So it's like, it worked. It's just going to take a while.
Well, they have to go and manually start everything up, which is in a different area.
And Sam Jackson's like, oh, it'll be 3 minutes. I'll go to the circuit breakers.
Yeah.
Oh, it'll be totally fine.
Yep. And it totally is. He's all good and everything works out.
I mean, you know, he has a big kahuna burger. Like, it's a good time. And then that's when they see like the ostrich like dinosaurs, where, like you pointed out before, it's almost like Sam Neill's The Kid, where he's like, what kind of dinosaur is that? Aren't they cool flying like birds? Yeah. And then it's like, let's get out of the way.
Tim starts to, he's like, they're flocking this way, and he starts to run.
And then a T-Rex eats the same T-Rex eats one of those, and while it's distracted, let's try to get out of here. And they come across a fence. At this point, or maybe just a little bit before that, Ellie and the Aussie go to check on Sam Jackson because they're like, fuck it, he's been gone more than 3 minutes. He's probably dead.
And this time it's Ellie taking the initiative, like, because normally she's kind of gone along with everyone. Like, she decides to stay back and look at the crap with the one park technician, or whatever the proper term would be. Technician, I guess. And then what was the other one? She decides to go with the Aussie to go find Grant and the kids. And I'm just trying to think what else.
Yeah, and then she goes to get the circuit breakers.
Yeah, she takes the initiative here, and then what's his name goes with her, which, you know, good idea. And then and Hammond feels a bit inadequate, you know, because it doesn't seem right to have the woman go. But it'd also be a little ridiculous for an old man with a cane, unless he had the.
Yeah, I mean, he's not going to do shit against a raptor. Like, he's got to get over himself.
But he has the teleporting abilities of the Easter Bunny. But he's like Clark Kent. He can't reveal this to everyone, and so it puts him in an awkward position. Yeah, so.
He can only do it when no one's looking. Really, the Easter Bunny is a lot more inadequate than people make him out to be. But
an old man with a cane.
Nonetheless, the Easter Bunny. Muldoon, the Australian guy, sees right away that they're being hunted and tells Ellie to just run for it.
Actually, I just remembered. So she was there when I think Grant was having a speech to the kid, you know, talking about the Raptors. Like, the attack doesn't come from the front; it comes from the sides. If what's his name is saying there's a raptor just there ahead, he could have said, well, they ambush people. But he maybe should even know that himself from observing the creatures attacking the bull in the pen every day.
Yeah, so that would have been a lot to, like, you know, give him a crash course lesson on raptor hunting. Yeah, she's probably not going to do that, but even he, just from observing the way they attack, maybe because the bull or whatever is ensnared and all that, you know, like cables and shit, maybe they don't even bother with the ambush attack pattern, you know? So maybe it's something he hasn't been able to actually observe. So that's a good point.
Yeah, I don't know, but just that little bit of information might have saved his ass. But
it's like a Chekhov's gun scenario where if you bring information into a movie, it has to have some sort of payoff or at least resolution to it. Right. Where, you know, if you bring up that raptors have this certain attack pattern.
Oh no, I get it. I just feel like, I mean,
maybe you're gonna see it in the movie.
But speaking of guns, we get the satisfying click of the Spaz 12 stock. And just like, I mean, all the clicks in this movie are the most satisfying clicks you'll ever hear. You know, it's so that and then when Ellie goes and hits the switches and presses the buttons, same thing. Just beautiful sounds in this movie.
Okay, so she's going through the
Oh yeah, he tells her to run because he says we're being hunted, and
he tells her to
really
run.
tense sequence.
She's jumping over over
He
like
goes all
logs,
parkour.
doing some gymnastics,
Right.
and then like you said, he dies. Like he gets ambushed. He's like clever girl,
Right.
and then you know, he gets his like face ripped apart is what it looked like.
Yeah, the thrashing is so violent that like it feels like a violent animal attack, even though we don't actually see anything. So that was really well done because it feels violent. So
yeah,
it's a way of getting around the PG-13.
And there's like, I get that why like in other PG-13 movies why you try to avoid that violence because you're trying to make a PG-13 movie and you're trying to, you know, because like lots of times movies only get greenlit if they're going to be PG-13, you know what I mean? So you have to have some sacrifices. Sometimes they almost acquiesce too much, whereas, you know, you just have some foliage in between, like him getting his face ripped off.
Well, and there's like that could be a whole thing itself because I've seen more recent PG-13 movies seem to have gotten a lot more lax with the violence where now they're kind of able to do. I think that was because of J.J. Abrams, because the earliest example I could think, well, who's big in television, but with like Cloverfield, the original Cloverfield, we get brief images of some pretty graphic gore, but it's so short that they can get away with it. And that was something that was, I think, with like Heroes and other TV stuff, Fringe and whatever, coming out, maybe even Lost, where it's like you could get away with gore, but it had to be really brief. And so they've gotten more lax that way, but it almost draws more attention to the problem because like I watched like The Shallows and somebody gets bit in half by a shark and we see, but they angle it in such a way where he's like, it's ridiculous. He's crawling on the beach. So we know he's been bit in half. We can't see like, it just feels like, you know, either commit fully to it or be, you know, do like Jurassic Park and cover it up and be clever about, you know, because the implication of violence can be done really well. I mean, too, it's just, but I feel like when it's so clear that they don't know how to they want to do something, but they can't.
Like, I mean, if you think about like Psycho, that's all implication.
Yeah.
That's, you
know.
But
it feels violent, you know, and so, I mean, so it's, yeah, there are ways of doing it and you can do it. It's like, and a lot of that was probably due to like the J-horror phenomenon, you know, in the early 2000s, like I think we brought up, but, you know, where it was all ghost stories and there wasn't a lot of violence. And so they went, wow, we can do horror movies without, and get the PG-13 rating. And then an unfortunate consequence of that was that like movies that shouldn't have been PG-13 kind of got hit with it. And then you'd maybe get the unrated DVD that, you know, that would have like 2 extra scenes of like a little bit of violence.
Ellie
Ellie goes down to flip the switches on.
Right. She's being directed by Hammond. She flips the switches. Grant and the kids are climbing the fence and, you know, he's doing like maybe a bad dad joke that he's getting zapped. And they try to see if they can break through or bend the fence around, but the T-Rex is coming, so they just got to climb.
But they hear it. Yeah. So there's this sort of, I don't know. There's sort of an urgency to the scene, but then later Grant saying, you know, take your time, it's not a race. But whatever, it spurs them on. And then, but the larger tension is that Sattler's flipping these switches down, you know,
that are turning the fences back on.
So,
and Lex jumps off the.
Well, they all reach the bottom first, and Tim's taking a while. And then they hear that the power is about to come back on because the sirens start to blare or whatever.
And he's like, just jump.
Yeah, and he's like, are you crazy? Because he's still way up there. And he's like, I'll catch you. And, you know, and so, yeah, Tim's just not, it's like he doesn't quite get it. You know, I suppose he's a kid, but he's too scared to jump. And then, like, so he gets blasted off, and he would be like 120% dead, but whatever. You know, so yeah, I mean, he falls all that way anyway. And then Grant has to do CPR. And it's it's also, you know, it's like this big, yay, we got the power back on moment, but it's contrasted by, you know, oh shit, like Tim's just gotten, you know, electrocuted. So it kind of, and then if that wasn't enough to kind of gut punch you, you know, then the Velociraptors show up.
We literally have a scene where she's happy and, like you said, like a yay, we're back online, and then
which is already undercut by Tim getting electrocuted. But if that wasn't enough, then Velociraptor
and that's one of the bigger jump scares in the movie. Like Sam Neill in the featurette was talking about how he was watching it next to Princess Diana, and like Princess Diana like really lost her shit in that scene.
Yeah, it is startling.
Oh, and then there's the Mr. Arnold, like she backs into a corner and Samuel L. Jackson's hand is resting on her shoulder, comforting, and then she realizes there's no body left with it. That's a gross out scene. Okay, and then with Tim having been zapped off of the fence, Samuel proceeds to do CPR, and we're just gonna do a quick PSA here. He does it very poorly. You have to lock your elbows. You always lock your elbows.
Yeah.
He's like kind of bending them. It's been worse in other movies. You kind of have
to be basically hard enough to like crack the sternum, right? I mean,
yeah.
And then Tim just fell off of it. So like probably just every bone in his chest is just broken, you know, like from the,
but you kind of have to when you're acting almost, unless you're using a dummy, because otherwise you'll literally hurt the other actor. So I kind of get why, but still poor form.
Oh, well, he resuscitates Tim. He doesn't die, but his hair is all frizzed up. And then, he takes him to the visitor center. And
at this point, Grant thinks that, you know, if the cages are back on, fences are back online, everything should be fine. But Ellie's like, run. And then the kids are eating Jell-O and sweets in the visitor section where there's like catering.
They're both smiling at each other from opposite ends of the table, but then she sees the silhouette of the raptor moving, which at first it's like a fresco or a mural or whatever of raptors. But then we see and then she freezes up and he's like, what's going on? You know, and her Jell-O starts shaking in her hand. And and
then we don't see exactly how they get right to the kitchen, but we cut directly to the kitchen scene. Where it's a very clever scene where they use reflections to try to distract.
I was always kind of trying to figure out the physics of the reflection, because to me it doesn't look like it quite. I don't know how if that would have.
It doesn't look like it makes sense. Yeah, I get it, but
it's still great. I mean, it's still like that scene is still super tense and whatever. And it was.
And they lock one. They lock one in in the freezer. So that motherfucker's probably gonna die.
Well, while they're doing that, and I mean, they're free, you know, like the other raptor. What's he doing? He's just kind of like, he doesn't see all this going on.
I think it's still concussed. It's still.
Oh yeah, he's just getting up, right? Because he slipped on some shit.
It saw her reflection and.
Oh yeah,
ran head first into a metal cabinet.
Okay, right.
And then so they managed to get out of that, and then they go to a computer system where they meet back up with Ellie and Alan, and Ellie and Alan have to hold the door shut because they're the adults. But so it seems like hopeless, because it's like, oh, what the fuck are the kids gonna do? The adults can't hold it forever. It's not locking. They have to break into the thing. But
and Grant's saying, you know, Ellie, go, you know, get the door locks on the computer, and she says you can't hold this on your own. So you know, and so it's clear that whatever has to be done on that computer. But
and it's raising the tension, and then Lexi saves the day. She's like, this is a unit system. I know this.
Which if you want to get like super geeky, that is a real thing. It's called the file system navigator, which you'd say FSN, or you'd say Fusion. And it's actually IRIX. So it is a Unix. Unix was created by AT&T. It's basically a operating system.
Is it unit or unit?
Unix, UNIX. And
okay.
So anyways,
it's a Unix system.
AT&T, and then so this would be like Unix System 5 or whatever. But Silicon Graphics Incorporated, SGI, which you can see their computers all over this movie. And some of the most, like, they were just like, I guess you had like Cray supercomputers, which like NASA had, but otherwise it's Silicon Graphics Incorporated just had the most cutting edge workstations, which the special effects for this movie were made on. Like, there's so much history with the Silicon Graphics computers, but anyway, they had a form of Unix system called IRIX, and within IRIX was the file system navigator, or Fusion, and that's what she's looking at. So that's a real thing.
Isn't it just easier to have a list of files and folders though, and not this 3D and not the 3D model that looks
actually,
cool.
like the PS2 on the memory card reader, like you go into the browser and it kind of looks a lot like that, where it was a 3D model of your. So
that was true way back in the
but
day, but
yeah, so I don't know. It looks cool as shit, but it was a real thing.
it looks like you're
So
being way more badass. But
just
Claire
going to
right
like the
there,
really boring file navigator on like Windows, just be like, it's a Windows system. I know this. Just like,
just
go to, yeah,
just
File Explorer.
Control F, visitor center door locks. Got
Right.
it.
Yep.
But anyway, it was a Unix system, and
Or
she
more
knew it.
specifically, IRIX, which was like a version of Unix. So yeah, which was proprietary for SGI.
I'm glad that it actually went into that much detail. Lex saves the day, the doors lock, but they start breaking through the glass anyway, and then they shoot it a couple times with the shotgun jams, and they have to climb into the vents, and then Lex almost gets eaten there because she almost gets butted up and
we
falls
see how
through.
how strong, like that the one in the opening of the movie's ripping that dude all over the place. If it got a hold of her leg, she's coming down with it. I mean, or the whole thing. Yeah. So she narrowly avoids it. It's a great shot. And
and that was actually done in 2 different shots apparently, because because when she was hanging down, that was a stunt double, but they composited her face on it. And then when they climbed up, it was her again or something. And then they climb out of the vents and they jump on these fossils in the visitor center.
Because the raptor, like multiple raptors show up, so they jump onto the hanging.
There's two raptors left. And like they're just kind of like dangling on these and they're falling. Tim almost gets crushed by a big fossil.
It's another great set piece moment, But,
And then
they all end up on the ground, ultimately surrounded by the raptors. Is the short version, though.
They're surrounded by the raptors. There's pretty much nothing they can do, and we're seeing that one's about to pounce, and that T-Rex snatches it. Right. And we still don't know how the T-Rex got through the doors. No, are the doors big enough?
Keep an eye out. So the lobby was under construction. You can see that a big opening big enough for the T-Rex to actually fit through. But the only question there is like, well, why didn't we hear the T-Rex? I mean, obviously it's for dramatic tension, but like you hear thump, 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 thump all the time, like the movie's played that up, and like, so why we don't hear it?
And they definitely would have seen it. They wouldn't just be focused on the raptor. They'd be like,
right. So, it's not as bad as the end of Johnny Mnemonic with, that's just garbage scene or anything, but
it's just garbage.
But no, it's actually, I mean, it's a really great scene. Then we get the shot of the Jurassic Park, banner falling around
the other raptor had pounced on the T-Rex, and then that's when they used it as their chance to escape. The T-Rex rips that other raptor apart, and then, like you said, the banner of when dinosaurs walked the earth falls down, and it's like a trailer moment.
And then having and Malcolm pull up, and they had already talked to Grant on the phone, and obviously it's a big shock that the phones are working. So like Hammond asks after his grandchildren, they're fine. Anyway, so then Hammond starts making phone calls, whatever, pulls up in a Jeep with Malcolm. Grant and all of them bail into the Jeep, and then there's that great line where it's like, after careful consideration, Mr. Hammond, I have chosen not to endorse your park, and Hammond says, so have I. So
and then they get in the helicopter. And
kind of like how it starts, they leave on the helicopter. And
Ellie gives him a look like, "Oh, you are going to be a good dad after all. What do you say we reproduce soon?"
How's it? Oh yeah, we see the pelicans flying over the sea, and
then it goes off into the sunset.
John Williams's beautiful music takes over, and so there we're at the credits, and
film ends. So place in society, cultural significance.
Timelessly relevant, especially as technology advances.
Timelessly relevant, timelessly entertaining. Somehow, probably not even a top 5 Spielberg film, though, which is fucking crazy. That's not a criticism of Jurassic Park. One of the
greatest movies ever, especially action, adventure, all that. But like, it's just Spielberg's so prolific that I might put Jurassic Park in my top 5 Spielberg films, but I could easily see a list where it doesn't make it.
I like Raiders. Totally I like Raiders more. So let's see. So I got like Schindler's, I got E.T., and these are all valid recommendations, by the way, for
Encounters,
so I have Schindler's, I have E.T., I have Jaws, and then I think Saving Private Ryan, and then Raiders. So that's probably my 5. Or I might switch Private Ryan and Raiders sometimes. And
Yeah.
then I think I have Close Encounters.
It's
But
really hard. I don't know.
the color purple is also really good. And like that one, like people fucking forget that Spielberg made.
I'm trying to think what other ones that kind of get forgot, because I mean, you kind of tend to think of like the larger Hollywood movies as Spielberg, but I mean, he's done plenty of like 60s dramas.
Amistad's not among his best, but it's good. It made the most money of any movie to this point in
Which maybe just because of like you tend to think of the 90s and everything's dealing with genetics, because I mean, like you just had the mapping of the genome and all that, like, so all the movies dealt with that. So but it's not aged because it's speaking to broader themes of, I mean, that could be applied or to AI or whatever. I mean, it's very Michael Crichton. Oh, that's the other thing. So Westworld would be a great movie to watch, because that was Crichton that directed the original 70s version, and very, again, a theme park going to hell.
It's very Jurassic Park-ish.
Yeah, so that, but it predates Jurassic Park, and then, but really just about, and then, I mean, any like the Andromeda Strain or ER, I mean, those are all Michael Crichton. They all probably have maybe, if you like Crichton and you like all the techno babble and whatever, those aspects of Jurassic Park, those would be, watch any movie that's been adapted from a Crichton novel. They're not all good. A lot of them are absolutely horrible. Some of those novels are absolutely horrible. But they all, like, a lot of them deal with, like, I remember like Prey was nanotechnology, and then they're worried about a gray goo effect. It's always technology running amok or something like that. So, and man's reach exceeding his grasp and stuff like that. So those would be other recommendations, I guess, off the top of my head. But definitely Westworld would be the most similar, like immediately, the 70s. Just trying to think if there's anything I'm leaving out. You start talking about the money, it's one of the highest grossing movies, right? So
Jaws is probably the most similar to Jurassic Park of Spielberg's films.
I would say definitely watch its sequel, which I think is hugely underrated, but The Lost World, I love, and that was also Spielberg. So but I know not everybody feels that way, but I don't know why. I think they aren't remembering the movie they saw. I mean, it's, you could say it's not as good as the first Jurassic Park. I think it's really close, but I don't know. But let's see. And then it's, as far as money, I'm trying to remember the actual numbers, but I think it was the 17th movie to surpass $1 billion when it was re-released in 2013 for 3D, and it just got re-released last year in theaters and rose to #1. Again, for the first time in 25 years, right? Or what would that have been? I can't remember the number. I suck with numbers, so this is probably all butchered. But yeah, let's see. And Jaws was re-released, and Empire Strikes Back. Like, so that's what was in the theaters, and yeah, it hit #1. So.
In a weird recommendation, you have to be in the right mood for it. And if you've already seen it and you don't necessarily feel like going back to it, I kind of get it, because it's a super hard movie to watch. But maybe watch Schindler's List down the road. He had filmed the better part of Jurassic Park in like the year 1992. And then post-production was coming like around the first half of 93. And while that was happening, Schindler's List was being filmed.
Right.
So, so he was working on the post-production of to that point, like the next level in visual effects in the history of cinema, right? Because it goes in steps. Like we brought it up before. It's like 2001, like Star Wars, or some stuff in between, Terminator 2, Jurassic Park, Lord of the Rings, Avatar. Like, those are the big ones. But so he's working on post-production for Jurassic Park at the same time he's working on pre-production and production of an intensely depressing, intensely personal Holocaust story. And he literally has massive lapses in memory, and it was just a blur. But I mean, he did his best fucking work. It's one of the best of all time. One of the hardest to watch, but one of the best. But Jurassic Park is one of the easiest to watch he ever made. Jurassic Park is timeless. What rating are you gonna give it, Dakota, out of 5?
I'm trying to shit. Okay, probably a 4.5. Like, part of me wants,
That's what I was gonna do. I was gonna give it a very glowing 4.5.
But then I think I love Lost World so much, I might give it the same score, though I would say this is a little better. So like I don't know. So that's the only reason I'm hesitating. Like, but yeah, 4.5.
It is, it's not his best. And, there are some like silly plot holes or whatever. And it's not like, and story-wise, it's not the most important movie ever. You know what I mean?
There is substance to it, which I think is the big thing that people forget somehow. Like this is far removed from just a spectacle Hollywood blockbuster. Like there is a lot of thematic substance and philosophical questions whatever being raised that, I mean, that isn't so heavy loaded that like kids aren't going to be able to appreciate it, but it's, it does have those moments, and those are what are kind of lacking.
Right. I definitely think it's a 4.5 that leans 5. This is our first Spielberg movie too. Thanks everybody for joining us on this Easter Sunday, watching a review of an Easter movie, Jurassic Park. It has eggs, it has a resurrection, it has an old white man that looks a lot like a bunny rabbit and has kind of mystical powers and gives away eggs and really cares for the chickens that hatch from them. On that note, ladies and gentlemen, happy Easter. Hold on to your butts.